the more you are able to bring out that which cannot be heard, the more you use the audible as the vehicle for the inaudible, so much the more is the music permeated with the soul. And it's very important to understand that eurythmy does not translate music on the stage. We do not take what the musician does and do something. It would be incredibly arrogant for us to say that we do visible music. And I hate this term in the sense that we do not take what the musician does and add on to it. Music is perfect. Music does not need eurythmy. Music has a life of its own, and it's very arrogant when you say it without understanding what you're saying, but when you say that you are making visible music. Actually, you could say that the human body, the physiology of the human body is filled with music. There is music in the bones. There is music in the way the bones are created. The gestures for the intervals that we have in tone eurythmy actually are a releasing of the gesture that formed the bones. What I mean is that you had a gesture that formed the bone in a certain way. In eurythmy, by releasing this gesture which formed the bone back out into space, you actually make the body an instrument of music, so that it is the bone singing out, but the inherent movement of the bones, the archetypal movement that formed the bone, that formed the physiology of the human being. It's as if the music was like the sun, and then the bones like ice. And so the music actually allows us to melt the ice of the bones and turn it into water, so that you do have a flowing movement. You do have music in eurythmy. Eurythmy is visible music. It is visible singing, but not from the point of view that we are translating, we're showing what the music itself, what the musician is doing. But we actually, at the contact of this music, we ourselves from the body create a music that comes out from this highly developed component of the human being, which is the physical body. And I think it's very important to place this and to approach musicians with reverence, knowing that they're sacrificing music in a very definite way when they allow eurythmy. But so is eurythmy sacrificing itself when it is done out of speech or done out of music. Speech and music are the parents of eurythmy, in the sense that they created it. They are what allowed the physical matter of eurythmy to come about. So that actually speech and music are the parents of eurythmy. They allowed eurythmy to come into being, but eurythmy is an art of itself, in and of itself, and there is nothing more powerful than silent eurythmy. When the lawful gesture, the lawful creating of eurythmy, of this art of movement, comes out of the gestures of eurythmy themselves. There is nothing more powerful than silent eurythmy. It's breathtaking if it's done right. And this hasn't happened. Eurythmy is a very, very young art. It has barely started growing up yet. It's lived very sheltered by speech and by music, and thank goodness, and they've allowed a certain development to happen. But if we want eurythmy to move forward and to develop more, it's going to need to develop out of the elements of itself, out of its own elements. And so there is a sacrifice when you do eurythmy to a piece of music or to a poem. You have to sacrifice all the possibility of what you could be doing, because you have to not only do these notes, these intervals, which correspond to this piece, to this style of music, to this sound, and so on and so forth, but you also have to be completely in line with the interpreter, so that you are married to that sound, to that tone. Different renditions of the chaconne, for example, if you take them on YouTube, they would have a basic ground form. So the ground form of the piece, there's a blueprint for it that is lawful in the sense that this is the chaconne. But then you would have 1,000 variations in how every musician develops their tone. So different musicians, whether it's Oistrakh or Milstein or Wengerhoff or Stern or Menuhin, would have to use, in a way, you would have to have a different consciousness of the body parts and know that you are not moving, that you're always moving from a different part of the body, because that interpreter has a certain type of tone, for example. So going back to the violin, to the piano, this in-between, eurythmy always addresses the experience then that one has of music. It doesn't translate music on stage, but it addresses the human experience that one has of music. It's an art of experience, very, very much so. And so, from the point of view of eurythmy, the piano is more the musical instrument of the two, because you have a note, it dies, you have another note, it dies. And you have to inwardly recreate the experience from one note to the other. So the inner experience of the person listening to the piano is very active. It has to go from this note and then inwardly create what brings you to the next note. The violin, it's done for you. There is the inner activity of the listener is not the same. The note is given, and then it's played out, goes up, it goes down, it goes backwards, goes forward, and then you have the next note. So this, in a way, you're very lazy. As a person listening to violin, you're very lazy compared to the piano. The piano asks of your experience much more.